Hey everybody, in this video we have our Ford Bronco here and we're going to be showing you how to install the Flex Era Fog Pocket Kit for Ford Broncos. Now this kit is specifically meant for Broncos that have the factory auxiliary switches, aka those Upfitter switches, but if you also have a kit with Switch Pros or a similar switch system, this will also work for that. There's two really important things to know before we dive deep into the install guide itself. This kit has two different modes on it. It's got a street mode and it has an off-road mode. So the street mode is a street legal SAE fog light in the center and then two Flex Era 1 lights on the outsides with amber backlight. Then when you hit the other switch, you have your off-road mode. The off-road mode turns on the high power for those SAE lights and the full power mode for the Flex Era 1 lights. So with that, let's dive deep right into the install, take a look at all the tools needed. All right, so before we get into the installation itself, we got everything nicely laid out on the table. So get all of your everything in the kit, lay it out so you know exactly what you're working with, from your wiring harnesses to all of your lights to the brackets themselves. And then let's go into the tools that are needed for this installation. So grab an Allen head for your Flex Era 3 SAEs. Then you're gonna need some 17 mil, either an open end or a socket. You're also gonna need a ratchet to go with that. Very important, you are going to need a Torx Plus, a TP40. This is different from a normal Torx head, a little bit more rounded edges, a little bit different. So make sure you have a TP40. Then some plastic pry bar tools, obviously some side cutters. If you want to do the best installation, we have a handful of zip ties already included in the kit, but we have a few more extra just because my OCD kind of kicks in. Want to have that. Then a few more wiring bits, so a stripper and a crimper. The kit also includes the butt connectors needed, but if you need extras for anything else, just have those on hand. Then for the cleanest job possible, a little bit of heat shrink tape and a heat gun as well. Step number one, we are going to get a bunch of the assembly done on a tabletop away from the vehicle before we actually dive into it. Just gonna make the whole process a little bit easier rather than trying to finagle stuff while you get the brackets onto the vehicle. So we're gonna get as much done as we can right now. Get the brackets and the lights mounted together. We're gonna get some crimping done, all that kind of stuff. So step number one, you're gonna wanna start with your Flex Era 3s, the SAEs, these are the fog light versions. And ultimately what you wanna do is you wanna be able to run the light in this configuration because it's a fog beam. So it does matter if this light is right side up or upside down. So for the street mode, for the fog light, it has to be in this configuration. But the mounting bracket is on the bottom. So what we gotta do is take off these two bolts, flip the mounting bracket over to be able to bottom mount this thing. So that's the step one. Grab your Allen and simply pull these apart. These lights they have been mounted onto our company Bronco for, I don't know, 8 months or something like that. So they're a little bit dirty, a little bit grimy. We tried to clean them up a little bit, but these were for testing for this fog pocket kit. So everything might look a little bit used because, as a matter of fact, it has been. So on both of the lights, you're gonna wanna pull out these two bolts. There's a washer with it, a black washer on the outside. Keep that right where it is. Then you'll notice here, as you pull off your bracket, there's another serrated washer right there as well. Keep that where it is. There's a little groove in the light for it. There's one on both sides. So you wanna just keep them exactly where it is. So I'm just gonna work on one at a time here. Take this bracket from this configuration and flip it over the light and go in that configuration just like that. Put the bracket into position and just by hand, going to finagle that screw bolt into place. Maybe not just by hand. Okay, I'm not gonna go super tight on it. Then I'm gonna flip it over. Now you can see I'm missing that washer, so I gotta grab that little washer, slip it in underneath the bracket, between the bracket and the light. Grab your other piece of hardware, make sure the washer is now on the outside, on the black one, and drop that in. Basically do the same thing. Now, what you just did is you took a light that looked like this, and you made a light that looked like this. So we wanna do that for both, so repeat the process on the other Flex Era 3 SAE light. After you have the Flex Era 3 SAEs taken care of, the next thing you want to do is now start to pay attention to the orientation of the mounting brackets themselves. So if you take a look right down here, we got the two different brackets. This is the driver's side of the vehicle. This is the passenger side of the vehicle. So what you can do is to tell, there's a slotted side and then there's a non-slotted side. So the slotted side is gonna go towards the front of the vehicle. The non-slotted side is gonna go towards the rear of the vehicle. There's a little bit of a hump on it. That hump is gonna go up and to the back of the vehicle. These holes up here are to slide the whole thing into position on the Bronco. These holes right here are for the lights themselves. So now what we have to do is mount our lights. They're all gonna be mounted upside down to the bracket itself. And there's just a couple little things to pay attention here. So you're gonna wanna leave these somewhat loose, hand tight, so you can kind of finagle things into position that they need to be in. But when it comes to the Flexera ones, these have an asymmetric mounting bracket. This is totally up to you, totally optional. It's not gonna change anything if you put it on one side or the other. But if you're OCD like me, what I like to do is as I'm mounting them upside down, I want the bracket always facing the outside of the vehicle. Don't know why, just what my brain likes to do. So you're gonna notice that you can have one like that. You can have the other bracket just like that as well. But if you put the other light, you're gonna have one on the inside and one on the outside. So I like to just keep it simple, make sure the Flexera ones are matched because they are side specific. Again, not gonna kill anything if you put on the inside or the outside. With that, I'm gonna start on the inside, 17 mil on these, and they are on fairly tight. So we already kind of broke all these loose. So just pop your nut off and your washer off and go ahead and put it into position. Put your washer into place and then start that nylock nut by hand, and then grabbing our deep socket and our 3/8 inch ratchet, and just gonna start cranking it down. Okay, so again, I'm not going crazy tight with it. You are gonna wanna be able to kind of aim these, position them a little bit later on. So just kind of leaving it fairly loose so that way you can do that, but tight enough to hold everything into position. This light is a little bit too floppy, so I'm gonna probably retighten that up. So, Flexera 3 SAE is done. Gonna move on to the Flexera 1s next. These have a carriage bolt in them, so it's a little bit harder to do this step. So you just wanna take your time, be patient, go slow with it. Any monkey with a wrench can kind of figure it out, but definitely helps if you're patient. Same story there, just get it snug. You don't have to go crazy tight on it. And then you can, if now is a good time to loosen this if you need to get it aimed, so you can see that it's really hard for me to aim that, so I'm probably gonna loosen that after I get this next one on here. So I'm just gonna grab this off, get it separated, then finish up the rest of this side. I just got all the lights mounted onto everything here, at least on the driver's side, so go to the passenger side. And we wanted to take a quick second to show you rough guidelines for aiming these things. For the fog lights, you're gonna wanna aim these suckers completely straight ahead on the vehicle, but because the wing on that bumper kind of angles out a little bit, it's not gonna look like it's completely in line with anything here on this bracket. So if you're holding this one side, the rear side of the bracket completely up and down, this is roughly where I would aim everything. So this is gonna be completely straight. Your inner or your middle Flexera 1 is gonna be pretty much at that same angle as your Flexera 3 SAE, straight ahead. And then the outermost light, I have kicked out just a little bit because I think having both Flexera 1s aimed at the same direction is a little bit redundant. So one is straight and one's kicked out just a little bit towards out of the vehicle. So copy this. So pretty much just repeat the process now for the passenger side set of lights. So bracket again, slotted towards forward, not towards the back. This one side, the thick side, is the innermost. I didn't say that earlier. Flexera 3 SAE goes on the inside. Okay, passenger side, done. So now that you have both sides of the brackets and all the lights kind of assembled together, you can just set these aside. So we're gonna just put these at the front of our table, and we're gonna now move on to the wiring harness. There are a couple of steps involved with getting this thing up and running. There are pins that you have to pin into the proper terminals. Don't be afraid. It's a harness that is multi-versatile. So because of that, that's why we did that. So I'll walk you through everything. It's gonna depend on your application, but right out of the box, I'll show you exactly what to do. So let's get this thing broken into. there are a bunch of little parts inside of this bag right here. So you do not want to lose any of these things, especially these little rubber grommets that go on the outside for weather sealing. So set that aside, probably don't even open it until you're ready. Then pull your harness out. And as a reminder, I said it in the beginning of the video, but this is a kit meant for vehicles, Broncos, with the factory auxiliary system. So the ends of the wiring harnesses are directly meant for that, where one's gonna go right to ground, and then the other two ends of the harness, one for your street mode and one for your off-road mode, are going to plug right into, splice into your factory aux wiring harness underneath the hood. Then on the other end of the harness, we're controlling everything just with this one harness. So it's actually really nice, really clean. So it's got 3 for this side and 3 for this side. As you can tell, the inner ones with the pins are for the SAE lights. So with that, let's open this package up and then I'll walk you right through which pins go into which terminal. Oh, we got the new matte ones in here. So inside of that little baggie, there's a couple different parts here, so I just wanted to quickly cover it. Obviously, handful of zip ties and then a KC sticker, but now this is the meat and the potatoes, stuff that really matters. You have a couple of black 3-pin triangular DT connectors. So obviously they are not pinned. They have the weatherproof stuff on the back, and then the hole is kind of in the front of the thing. Then these are more components that go along with those after you've done the pinning. And then there are 2 butt splice connectors. These are for the side of the harness that connects the harness to the aux system. So with that, let's show you guys how and what to do with these. If you look at the harness, you're gonna notice that 2 of them are already pre-terminated with the connector, the DT connector already done, and then 1 is not. So on these triangular DT connectors, the black is always gonna go in the bottom. And by bottom, I mean the side opposite of the little push pin side, right? So black is gonna go into that one down there. And then for the SAE configuration, which is this kit that we're doing the install video for with the street legal fog light, you're actually gonna do the opposite of these 2. So the red wire is gonna go in the top right and the white wire is gonna go in the top left. So the reason why we did this is because this harness can be used for somebody that really actually wanted all off-road lights. They didn't care about street legal fog lights. So if you're gonna run that, then you would run with red on the top left, white on the top right. But again, we're not doing that. So really what you wanna do, put the black into the bottom location. And really, I just like to get them just kind of started. You're gonna put the white into the top left and cross over that red one and get that red one into the top right. So now you can see they're pretty much all into position, and push each one in until you hear it kind of click into place. This is a part where you want to be fairly delicate with things, but you also want to make sure that they are all the way pressed through. So now you can see the bottom one is all the way pressed through, but the white and the black, or the white, I'm sorry, and the red are not. So just keep going through until it kind of presses in, just like that. Once you've done that, you can grab this little piece and orient it in that right position. Obviously, if it looks like that, that's not going to be correct. So just kind of spin it around until you find the correct orientation. Once you do, it just clicks into place very easily. Now, all you have to do is repeat that process on the other side. Okay, so now that we have the DT connectors already all pinned and everything's done on this side of the harness, there's only one step left with the harness, and that is the side that connects to the factory aux switch, or the aux system on the Bronco itself. So you could do this if you have an S-Pod or Switch Pros or something like that, or trigger system, aux beam, whatever. But obviously, because we have the Upfitter switches, that's what we're gonna do it to. You have the butt splice connectors and you have raw wires. We're gonna save this until the end once we get everything ran, simply because I don't wanna damage those if I crimp them on now and then run the wires and those things get all pinched or pulled off or whatever. So we're gonna save those, keep them for safekeeping. And now it's time to go over to the Bronco. So you obviously got a couple different ends for the harness itself. The side that has the raw wires is gonna go on the driver's side for our vehicle because that's where the upfitters are. So the long end with the 3 connectors is gonna go onto the passenger side. The side with the connectors a little bit closer is gonna go on the driver's side. And this is ultimately gonna run up in there. So what we gotta do first, let's pop the hood open and get our hood strut kind of into position. And now we're gonna start to kind of get the panels removed on the bumper. We're gonna start to fish everything through. So let me get into position here and then we'll kind of walk you through, starting on one side of the vehicle, how to run everything nice and cleanly into position, zip tie it all together, then we'll throw in the lights and connect everything after we get all that stuff ran. Okay, now that we're over on the vehicle, we wanna pull off this plastic panel just so that we can run the wiring behind everything and keep it nice and clean and out of the way. It's out of the way of any obstacles coming at you, but it's also out of the way of the radiator itself. So there's 4 pins. There's 2 up by the recovery points, and then there's 2 down on the bottom here, and then the whole thing pulls out. So these suckers are tight on the Bronco. So our little tool here will literally just, it's gonna snap off. So Daniel on our team found a good little trick with a pair of side cutters. Basically, you kind of pinch in with those, and then you can just kind of leverage it out with, obviously because of the beveled angle on it. So we're doing that, and then just kind of pinch it and pull it out. And then now, obviously, those are a little bit further out. And now you can pull that whole thing out and twist and pull. So what you're gonna wanna do is pop this thing off, but it's not as simple as that looked. As you can tell on the back, there are 2 per side friction fit pins. So those align right here and right here. So what you really are gonna wanna do is, once this is really pressed in, you kinda wanna finagle your fingers behind that and pull even with gentle but even firm pressure. You don't wanna go all of a sudden yank it at one point, because one of these will snap off and that's gonna suck. So what you wanna do again, just kind of leverage your fingers behind it as much as you can and smooth, consistent pressure, pulling backwards in order to get these clips to release. If you do it right, it's not gonna break. Okay, once again, we're gonna grab our side cutter trick and just kind of leverage those out. That one was already halfway done, so that's cheating. This one. This is that point now where there's 2 here and then there's kind of 2 here. So this is where you're gonna wanna pull smooth, evenly. Oh, you can see this. Okay, we didn't do this properly at one point. And we torqued this at the wrong angle. So you can see ours has a crack in the plastic. So yeah, update, learn from our mistakes. Pull out and even and smooth. Okay, so like that, that side just popped out. Now I'm just gonna go onto this side and work it as much as I can. And now, all 4 of those pinched right off. Obviously you can see that we pulled it too much on one and I don't know, we cracked that on accident at one point. So don't do that, because that's at the point where this is. So if you can, just pull it out. Obviously the inner one for me worked a little bit easier. You can get your fingers behind this a little bit better. So these are also labeled left and right. So you don't have to worry too much about getting these things mixed up. Don't lose these things, put it all together somewhere nice. And now we're at the step where we can grab a harness and start to work our way in and kind of run everything nicely and neatly and cleanly. So let me get this into position, can figure out my plan of attack, and then I'll share my plan of attack with you once I have it figured out. Okay, we're at the point now where we're gonna start running all the wires from the passenger side of the vehicle all the way through the bumper, up to the next fog pocket, and then up behind the driver's side headlight and into the engine bay. In order to do that, we've got 3 wires on this side that are kind of floppy. So just one little trick of the trade to help with this and make it a little bit easier. We're just gonna run a piece of electrical tape just right over the edge of that to keep them combined. Now, at this point,
Jacob comes over on this side. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start obviously on the inside of this, and we're gonna run things through back behind this toe point, the recovery. Then we're gonna run right underneath here, and we'll show you a little bit more detailed shots of that. We're gonna there's some wires in the way and a little bit of flap here. We're gonna run all of that through here, back behind the other recovery point on that side, and then into the fog pocket. So there's a couple things that are gonna help here at this point to get it easy and ready for you. The first of which, if you kind of dig your finger underneath there, you may find a connector that looks like this. We have no clue what this is for. This is on our factory Bronco, just stuck under there. So if you know what this is for, please let us know in the comment section, because this is bewildering to me. You'll feel behind where that goes, if you lift this kind of out of the way, that there is a little slot kind of right at this bend where you can reach through and come to the other side of the opening right here for the radiator. And then at the same time, that's where you're gonna wanna run that wire. At the same time, in here, there is a little flap. It's just a rubber little flap that I think is just intended as kind of an air dam to keep air going into the right direction. If you just peel your fingers under there, you will be able to fold that up. I have our panel remover tool underneath it just to keep it held up for me. Not that big of a deal, but underneath that flap is where we're gonna run those wires. So, as now you kind of have everything tucked up out of the way, I'm gonna start. Gonna come through the back with this wire here. Gonna get it somewhat pulled where I need it to be. Now, as you can see, these are not the smallest connectors in the world, but there is room to get all this done. So basically you want your 3 up in that side, just like that. I'm just gonna kind of keep those right there. And now, basically finagle your fingers in, find that little gap, as you can see my finger right through there, and start to work things through. And then I'm not even gonna worry about going underneath the flap yet. I'm just gonna get it pulled all the way through. And then I will tuck these underneath that flap after I get these big things kind of through, because this is the hard part in order to get those tucked through. So I'm gonna do one at a time. And if you just take your time and are patient and just kind of find the best angle of attack, you'll eventually be able to get those behind your wire loom. So now you can see there's this little flap here. If you kind of dig in the corner, it's a little bit easier to get it out. So once you have your wire as much through as you can, basically lift that flap up and start to slide our harness under that. That will just make sure everything stays clean and protected and out of the way. Okay, now, next step is to continue running these through these little corners. One of the things that we found, this is optional, kind of depends on how much room there is. It's useful to push this little harness out of the way. That's for whatever this mystery connector is. In order to do that, this little white plastic pop rivet thing is what holds everything in. So you can push that through. It's one of those ones where it's kind of flapped on the outside, so as it goes through the hole, it kind of spreads out, so when you try to back it out, it doesn't like to go in easily. So you gotta get needle nose pliers and kind of pinch on top and bottom and on the sides in order to push it through. Otherwise, you're just gonna break it. If you wanna break it, I mean, it's up to you. Wouldn't recommend it on our side, but it's also for a harness that we have no idea what it's for on our vehicle. So it's clearly not a harness that we use very often. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead, push this thing out of the way, pull this extra little flap more out of the way, and then run the wires the rest of the way through. That gives people a good idea of where those need to go. There we go. So now, finish sliding this underneath that flap back here. All the way under there. Get this out of the way, go underneath that. Grab our end, and go up here. This is why we haven't installed the lights yet, because it's obviously nice to be able to kind of reach through and just start grabbing stuff. So at this point, just kind of fish everything through nicely and neatly. Okay, so there's all that. Now we can put all this back, tuck those away, and now all three of these are for this side. And now we're gonna take this end and put it all the way up through behind the thing. Totally optional at this step. If you have a snake, like for plumbing or for electrical inside of your house, not for plumbing, don't use a plumbing snake. Use an electrical snake for inside of your house. I don't know why I said that. Drop your snake in from the top. You'll see there's an opening. We'll go up there and show it, but drop it in, and then you can tape this whole bundle right through. It'll make this a 2-second process. As we were doing this earlier, it was like a 2-man job and a 10-minute process just to get these wires from here up into the engine bay. So a snake will save you a little bit of time. Okay, so if you have a snake, grab it, get about 2 to 3 feet. Obviously run your hook end right by your battery. On the outside of the vehicle, you'll see there's a cross member here. If you reach your hand under it, you can feel it's just a cross member. So what you're trying to do is take your snake, go under there, through the hole, and then what you'll notice is right away, it comes out right where you want it to be. So it's literally as simple as that, but it's so tight in there that if you're gonna try and get your hand through there, unless you have really skinny arms and really long fingers, you're gonna be about 8 inches off of where you need to be. So this is definitely gonna be your best friend. I'm actually gonna be lazy. I'm just gonna drop that through just like that. Probably wouldn't recommend you doing this. What I probably should be telling you to do is just tape it, but it's not gonna take a lot of pressure, so whatever. And voila. Now we've got that pretty much where we want it. I think I pulled it a little bit too much and the wires are kind of hidden. So I still want to be able to get access to your 3. So now at this step, what we're gonna do is we're gonna route this under the hood roughly where we want it to go, which is that back corner. And then I'm just gonna leave it like that. The reason why I'm gonna leave it like that is because now I wanna get all of our brackets with our lights assembled in here and plugged in, and then I can take up the rest of that slack inside of the engine bay. You don't want too much slack from the wiring harness and from the lights in here, because as you turn your steering wheel, there's a chance that it's gonna be rubbing that harness if you have, an extra 6 to 8 inches of wire hanging out under here. So what we wanna do, get everything connected, get everything mounted up, and then pull out the rest of that slack. So let me get the lights. Okay, now is the step to get the lights into the position here. As I mentioned before, there are 3 positions, which means there are 3 bolts that you gotta loosen or completely remove. This is where the TP40 comes in handy. As you can tell on any of these, it fits perfectly. A Torx bit will work, but it's not gonna work perfectly. Yeah, it would suck to strip one of these out. So I would definitely recommend a TP40 on these. So we're just gonna loosen these a fair amount because that bracket is pretty thick. So you gotta loosen it quite a bit in order to slide that in. So you can see that I have maybe 2 total threads inside of each of these so that this will slide right in. The trick to getting this in, if you come from directly underneath it, it's gonna be a pain in the butt, but if you reach your hand all the way through, kind of to where your coilover is gonna be, and then just pull that whole bracket through, it'll finagle right into the position that you need it to be, and you can put it right up in there. So if you try to go any other position, it's gonna be a pain in the butt. But as is, that's essentially what we're aiming for. And we're gonna go ahead and get these things tightened up, and then you can do the final adjustment from there.
make all of your connections, remembering that the black one goes to the FlexAir 3 SAE, and then those other two gray connectors, doesn't really matter which goes to which for the two FlexAir 1 modes. Now is at the point where grab your harness and start to connect lights. Again, the black one is going to be for your SAE, so just going to connect those until you hear the click. My OCD wants to run it middle to middle. Okay, so now what you can do is I would probably run a zip tie or two right on all these just to kind of keep everything clean and nicely together. Once things start getting separated, it looks ugly and it'll be easier to kind of do your wire management with that. So now at this point, I'm gonna go grab some zip ties and pinch those together and then kind of tuck those way up behind the recovery point back here, out of the way. And there's a few things that you can feel back here that you can zip tie that whole bundle to. I'm gonna do that just because I want these wires completely out of the way and making sure that it's not making contact with anything. So once you have that done and you have all these wires clean and protected and tucked back in here and zip tied out of the way, that's when we can go put our plastic panel back on and cover all this ugliness up and kind of return it back to factory. So let me grab some zip ties and then I don't think we're gonna be able to show you back here, but if you reach your hand around kind of from here, you'll be able to feel a great point that you can get some zip ties onto. Once again, I'm gonna show you the tip and trick for kind of getting this in. So start with the FlexAir 3, kind of like that. Go all the way underneath through your panel there and then kind of finagle it into position and pretty quickly it'll pop through. And then just go ahead and get those all into position. Now, if your lights are aimed too low, they're gonna make contact down here. So you just gotta make sure they're not in the way. And then just start to tighten this by hand and then grab your wrench and finish it off. We're gonna go ahead and connect these wires now, then get back to zip tying. Once again, what the heck is going on here? Your black one is gonna go to your SAE, and then the rest go to the rest. Now that we have all of the wiring completely ran, we got our light pockets and the fog pockets all installed with the brackets and everything, we can finally go ahead and push these little things back into position. So, two angled ones at the bottom, and remember the friction fit, so what you're gonna wanna do is just line those up. You can just kind of do it by eye, and then when you go to push them in, just push them in just kind of straight in and they'll just fit right in, keep everything nice and snug. You'll see everything kind of start to line up. And once all your holes line up, you can push your retainer pins back in. So make sure they're still pulled all the way out. And then you kind of want to rotate them in until it looks just like that. And then just press them in. Left-handed, nailed it. All right, cool. So now with that, we're done with the bumper. Everything from headlights down is completely done. Next step is to finish off the job with our wiring. So take this and we're gonna connect it over to our factory auxiliary system after we route the wiring where we want it to go and connect the ground to the ground. So next up is that. Under the hood of the Bronco, if yours is equipped with the factory aux switches like ours are for the Upfitter system, you're going to have all 6 of the powered wires. You got a 30 amp, a 15 amp, and then 4 10 amps coming right out of this loom right here. So you can see we've already used almost all of ours before. We've actually already used the big yellow one as well, but we're going to connect. We've got 2 different modes on this kit. So we've got a street mode and an off-road mode. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna connect the off-road mode, which is the high amperage mode, to circuit number 1 on our Bronco, which is this yellow wire. And then for the street mode, we're gonna connect it to this one. And this one actually has not yet been touched by us. This is exactly how it's gonna look when you pull it out from that loom. From the factory, as you can tell, it's got a little bit of heat shrink on the outside of it, so you need to cut that portion off, and then you need to strip just, I don't know, maybe 1/4 of an inch worth of wire and connect that to one of the 2 of these different wires here. So that's really the name of the game. At this point, we are trying to connect the wires that we just ran for the fog pocket harness, the red and the white on this, to the 2 different wires on your Upfitter system, or alternatively, if you don't have one of those and you're just using this pocket kit with something else, maybe to your Switch Pros kit or something along those lines. So let me grab my tools and we will get to stripping and connecting these. On our harness, the red wire controls the off-road mode, which is the full power brightness on the FlexAir 3 SAE lights, as well as the full power brightness on the FlexAir 1 lights. So as you can see, this is already pre-stripped. So now what we need to do is grab the yellow wire that we're gonna go into and strip just a little bit off of that. Okay, now that we have this one completely stripped and pretty much ready to go for the butt connector, as you can tell, the way that I have routed both the white and the red wires, it leaves a bunch of excess. So I'm gonna snip just a little bit of that, and I still want there to be, you know, a little bit of surplus, but I don't think we quite need this much. So I'm probably gonna cut, I don't know, maybe 6 inches total off of that, and then re-strip this end just so I have less surplus wire underneath the hood of this thing. So what I'm gonna do is cut one at a time, right about there, right about there. Now this is stuff you don't need. Grab your stripper, and once again, we're gonna go for the red, which is the off-road mode first. Strip about that much off. I like to grab from the base and kind of twist it out, make sure that's not gonna go anywhere in the butt connector. Do the same thing over here. Then grab your heat shrink. So one of the things that you can do for the cleanest install is to grab a little bit of heat shrink. This is not included with the kit, so you're gonna have to grab this separately. And I would cut off, I don't know, maybe 2 inches or so, and slip that onto your red and your white wires before you have crimped everything. Ideally, I would have done this before I actually had stripped this, but I forgot to do that. But at least I did it at the end. So slide that just completely down out of the way. We'll come back to that after we get the butt connector on. Grab your crimper and grab your butt splice. Now at this point, go to the side that is for the insulated, drop it in the blue, and I am going to do the yellow wire first because I have the least amount of that. Slide it in, crimp it tight, and follow the same process with your red wire. Make sure that's fully seated inside that connector and crimp it down. Now at this point, you can take your heat shrink and go over that full thing. Should form a nice tight fit. And now you can heat shrink over this entire thing and make sure it's a nice watertight connection. Even though it's already under the hood, not likely to get too much water in here. We like to do this just for a little bit of extra peace of mind, make sure nothing in here is gonna rust out prematurely or anything like that. It's time to repeat that same process for the white wire. So again, cut about 2 inches of heat shrink. And now that I remember to do this, before I strip the white wire, it's gonna be a little bit easier. I'm gonna make sure I don't have any stray strands of that core in there. Slide that all the way down, get it out of the way. Grab the strippers and just a little bit of wire. That might be too much. Just about that much. Get that out of the way. Set that aside. Now, for the one that's from the Ford Upfitter switch, we need to cut this bit off that has the heat shrink on it to keep the end nice and protected. So gonna snip that right at the very tip of that, just to make sure I have the most amount of this wire. Grab the stripper again. And just gonna twist that right there. Whoop, lost that. Grab this one, twist this. And grab the butt connector and crimper tool. Gonna put it on the small wire first. Okay, final step is to connect the ground wire now that everything else is done. So it's a 10 mil, we're gonna pop this off. You can see we already have a bunch of other grounds right there, so we gotta kind of be careful just to hold all those down at the same time as we get this flange nut off. Slide that sucker right into position. Tighten everything back on. And with that, that's everything. So, as you can tell, there's quite a few steps in this installation process, but when you break it down bit by bit, it's really not that scary. So, if you have any questions about this installation process, please let us know in the comment section below, and Jacob or myself will get back to you as soon as we can with the proper answer. If you are interested in this product, if you haven't yet purchased it, click the link in the description below and you can snag it for yourself. With that, we hope that you found this video useful. It's quite the installation guide and quite the process here. So again, hope it was useful for you. If you did like it, please give us a big thumbs up on this video. It really helps us out. And with that, thanks for tuning in, and remember to adventure further.